This is the Manufacturing Report. I'm Scott Paul.
The U.S. is the most open market.
Yeah.
And so we're the example of openness. We expect that from our trading partners.
Welcome to a special edition of the Manufacturing Report. I'm Scott Paul, live at the Washington Auto Show at the Washington Convention Center in downtown D.C. I am surrounded by amazing vehicles made in America. I'm in the Ford display currently, and soon I'll be sitting down with Curt Magleby, who's a vice president at Ford, to talk about some of the public policy issues that impact American manufacturing, their ability to supply good products, and what they're hoping for in 2018. Let's get started. And I'm pleased to be joined by Curt Magleby. He's the Vice President of Government Relations for Ford Motor Company. Ford's a global company, but it has its heart and soul in Detroit and has auto production facilities all over the United States and an extended supply chain supporting tens of thousands of American jobs, including jobs in the steel, tire, glass, aluminum, auto parts, paper, you name it. I think Ford just about covers it. And we're here at the Washington Auto Show, which is a really exciting venue. You see the latest technology on display here. It's an amazing venue to have a conversation like this. So Curt, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Well, first of all, thanks for that intro. It's right, because Ford is at the tip of the iceberg, right? We have manufacturing facilities in 5 states, but that really doesn't represent, what we have across the United States. We have suppliers in 48 states, and we're still trying to get something going on in Alaska and Hawaii so we can go visit. But that's really where the depth and strength of manufacturing in the U.S. is. It's in that supply chain.
Yeah. So, public policy obviously has an impact on the fortunes of manufacture. There's some things you can't control, like how old cars are, what the consumer take-up rate is, what the global economy looks like, but there are some public policy issues, and I know that you're a global company,
right.
But there's a lot of pressures that that manufacturers, including Ford, face from overseas competition, and Korea, Japan, these are kind of issues that haven't been addressed yet. What are your hopes as you look ahead to see that this administration, this Congress can have a bit of a focus on these types of competitive pressures?
As a global economy, trade is in our DNA. I mean, we have exported and been involved in operations around the world since the very foundation with Henry Ford. But we're practitioners of trade. We understand, that trade has to be fair. It's got to be equitable. Countries have an ability to shape trade rules, and over time, we've seen where we need to make sure that those are level. That we need to provide, for American workers, the ability for them to compete overseas. So every trade agreement we think is very important. So NAFTA, we're out there saying, NAFTA needs to be modernized. It should be upgraded. It was, it's been decades since it's really been touched. And you have to look at those trade balances. I think first of all, you need to address standards. Standards in the U.S. should be easily adopted by our trading partners. In the same way, too, we always look at currency issues. We think currency is a big barrier for the 21st century. It's not so much on the tariffs anymore. We've gone beyond that. So we think there should be currency provisions in any trade agreement. So NAFTA can adopt those provisions. If we look at something with Korea, we're talking about Korea upgrading the Chorus agreement, the Korea-U.S. agreement. We've got to make it work for us and be equitable. Right. Same thing if we go to anything else with U.S.-Japan. Any trade agreement should really provide a balance for U.S. workers and U.S. manufacturers.
One thing that Gary Cohn, who is not an auto guy, but he's a business guy, he's the director of the National Economic Council, says, so we believe in reciprocal trade. And do you think what we have now with Japan, Korea is anything that approaches reciprocal trade? It sounds like we need to make some progress to achieve that.
I think the proof's in the pudding. If there's such a trade imbalance, there's a problem. Yeah. We've got competitive vehicles across the full spectrum. And so when you don't see more of a balance on trade, there's some embedded issues, and those have to be addressed. One that you mentioned was currency. I mean, currency is how trade happens. It's how things are defined and priced. That's one. And we've seen where countries can basically intervene in the currency markets, and we call it direct currency manipulation.
Sure.
And that's one thing that we're trying to say, that hey, currencies can trade and fluctuate, but no government should put their finger on the scale.
That's right.
That's a classic
Right.
case in point.
Yeah, and you can make the innovations, you can have a workforce, you can be incredibly productive, yet your hands are in a way tied by exchange rates,
Sure.
where the overseas producers have an unfair advantage.
Yeah, exactly.
Exporting to the United States and then you trying to ship goods over there.
Yeah, we've just had a recent issue, even in Vietnam, for example. We've got vehicles from our Chicago assembly plant, Explorers, that are shipped around the world to all markets. Boom, stop because of a change in their trade agreement, trade structure. That's not fair. We should break those barriers down. Our goods should be equitably available in all markets around the world because the U.S. is the most open market.
Yeah.
And so we're the example of openness. We expect that from our trading partners.
Yeah, it seems like a reasonable standard. So let's talk about the future a little bit as well, because electrification, autonomous vehicles, these are things that people are talking about. There are public policy considerations there, and obviously each company is looking at it from an innovation perspective, from a production perspective. How are you preparing for this future at Ford?
Well, things are changing. That's absolutely the bottom line in the auto industry. You can't go to a showroom and see the new product every year and see how it's changing. And in government relations, we get the perspective that government policy is intertwined in everything we do, whether it's fuel economy standards, our efforts to reduce greenhouse gases, our efforts to provide more efficient vehicles. So electrification is part of that core moving forward. We've announced recently more than doubling our focus and capital on electrified products, battery electric, plug-ins, hybrids. You're going to see a lot more in the lineup of Ford going forward. We talked about $11 billion by 2022. And for us, 2022 is right around the corner, right?
Sure,
That's our design cycle.
Right. You've already got the wheels in motion.
Yeah, wheels are in motion, and that's
2022,
exciting. So you're going to see these changes coming in. So electrification is going to be at the core. In addition, we're making heavy investments on autonomous vehicles. And that technology, there's a lot of different levels of autonomy. Car without a steering wheel is what you consider, full autonomous. And we're going there, but at the same time, those technologies are going to come down into the basic vehicles that people expect to drive every day. So we're seeing that, in some of our new vehicles that we have to offer.
I know one of the criticisms is we've seen, Silicon Valley companies implement and deploy technologies that policy has a hard time keeping up with it.
Right.
I imagine that's a concern as well, how you align the amazing innovations that are occurring within the auto space, and I would say that a lot of these are happening in Detroit, not just in Silicon Valley. But what kind of a challenge is that for you?
Well, you're right. Well? We thrive with certainty. We're looking at product programs 4 years out, 8 years out. We need to know where we're going, what the policies are. So we would like the certainty, and at the same time, the technologies are moving so fast that policy can't keep up. So autonomous vehicles, for example, right now, the laws would prohibit you from deploying autonomous vehicles. You can test in states. We've worked with states for testing, but you can't deploy more than 2,500 units over a 2-year period. That's not enough to invest billions of dollars to focus on 2,500 units.
Sure.
So we've worked with DOT and others in this space and said, okay, what is a solution in the near term? And that's with Congress. And so there is legislation going forward in Congress to provide a solution for autonomous vehicle deployment in the near term as regulations are being written, as the Department of Transportation is working collaboratively with us to define. So that's where policy and our policymakers can work with us as we look at the future.
Yeah, and that seems like an issue that shouldn't have a partisan bent to it at all.
No, we're very close to passage on that. I mean, it passed. In today's world where nothing passes, everything's on the knife's edge, it passed out of the House unanimously.
Yeah.
I mean, when have you seen that, right?
Yeah, hardly ever.
It passed out of the committee in the Senate unanimously. Okay, wow.
Yeah.
And now we're looking at a Senate vote, and Senate has some unique rules where a few senators are trying to get their issues resolved, and we're going to move forward.
Okay.
So that's going to be exciting.
Well, that's good to hear. So one of the things I wanted to mention to you is that a lot of the kind of policy support for manufacturing gets derided these days, and President Trump said, I'm going to bring back manufacturing jobs, and some people like to think, well, that means like a steel mill in Pittsburgh in the 60s, or an old assembly plant like at River Rouge where you had tens of thousands of people. and want to be dismissive of it. Look, I think that's a mistake, because clearly you look around, I mean, all these autos were built by humans as well as robots. But take us inside a factory today. I mean, there's a lot of automation, there are industrial robots, but you also have hundreds or sometimes thousands of really highly skilled workers that are craftsmen and women.
Inside a plant, it is unbelievable. That's really what's exciting. And anybody we bring into one of our plants, it's an orchestration of logistics. It's bringing everything from around the world, basically, and a lot of ours comes from the 48 states, as I mentioned. But bring that in on an hourly, daily basis. So we integrate technology. I mean, anytime we look at a new product, we're looking at in the billions of dollars, to integrate that in. So. Workers, their job responsibilities are changing, and that's why we spend a lot of time on upskilling. The job of, look at the vehicle. I have a 1967 Mustang that we've restored, right? And it's all mechanical. It's all very simple. You compare that to today's vehicle and what has to happen. So the workers have to change their role, and automation and technology integrates with that. Boy, we have skilled workers that really control the operations of a plant. It is an unbelievable experience to come in and see that happen. So we see where manufacturing will continue along the path of skilled and the workers to make things happen. Not only at our assembly operations, because that's just assembly, but then go down to the tier one, where a lot of research and development happens, a lot of core manufacturing, all the way down to the commodity suppliers, the mom and pops, as we would say. You're going to see cascading integration in anything we do.
Yeah.
So we don't fear the future in terms of automation. It's not going to take the workers away, but it's going to change the role.
Sure.
And together, that's another big policy issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Together, we need to make sure that our workers, our education system is preparing for the future.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think in the minds of some, and particularly in the media, they look at a factory 25 years from now and they picture kind of the Terminator, but it's simply not the case. It sounds like you're going to have skilled workers. They may be doing different jobs, but that artificial intelligence, automation, are going to be augmenting the kind of work.
Augmenting the skill sets, and look at the ergonomics we have too, to make sure that the workers of today are able to do their jobs more effectively, more efficiently, without precisely. It's an amazing experience. So we invite anybody to come out, and because actually the Rouge, that was at the turn of the century. That was the real focus there in Dearborn, Michigan. Yeah. We updated the Rouge how many years? About 10 years ago, to make it a showcase again. It's where we produce the F-150s. More than half of our F-150s, about one every 50 seconds comes off the line.
Sure.
Which
is
open
an
for tours.
Extraordinarily popular vehicle, right? Yeah.
So come take the tour.
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing to stand in the catwalks and see what's going on.
Well, good. Well, speaking of that, I can't wait to check out some of the Mustangs and other vehicles that you have here. Curt, thanks so much
build in America.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thanks so much for joining me today.
Right. Pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yeah. Hope you enjoyed my interview with Curt Magleby of Ford. Again, we're live at the Washington Auto Show. There's a lot of vehicles here made by men and women all over America. And if you can't make it to this auto show, I sure hope that you can make it to an auto show near your city. It's worth seeing this amazing technology and this craftsmanship that is brought to you by hundreds of thousands of men and women in the United States of America. You can catch this and other episodes of our podcast on iTunes and SoundCloud. You can always connect with us on our Facebook page, at Twitter, at Keep It Made in USA. And I hope you'll stay tuned for fresh content in a couple of weeks from the Manufacturing Report. I'm Scott Paul, and I also want to thank the teams at E18 and AAM for putting this together, as well as Ford Motor Company for being an incredibly gracious host. Thanks again for joining us. Together, we can keep it made in America.